they're not going to know that I'm asking questions, so if you could sort of repeat the question in your answer so that the viewer has a frame of reference.
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Okay, so if you could just give us your first and last name, spelling your last name, and your rank.
Sure. My name is Matthew Renelli, Renelli, and I'm a lieutenant in the United States Navy.
Okay, thank you. So Matthew, when did you return to the States and from where?
I returned approximately 4 weeks ago from the Horn of Africa area, specifically in the countries of Kenya and Djibouti.
Do you want to do that one more time, because the last country got a little
Sorry.
throaty. Okay.
I returned approximately 4 weeks ago from the Horn of Africa area, specifically in the countries of Kenya and Djibouti.
Wonderful. Now, when in the framework of cultural awareness, when you began interacting with people, were there times when you felt as though something was not quite right and that the ship had to be righted a little bit, and how did you do that?
There were times speaking with one or two of the locals that we had to engage with where concepts you were trying to get across did seem a little foreign to them, and you didn't quite know how to reword it so that they would understand.
We'll restart that question, that door slamming kind of.
Oh, okay. So we'll talk about doing something and knowing it didn't quite work out the way you had intended, and how you were able to write that.
There are times while we were out speaking with the locals where we would try to convey some ideas to them, and you could see that they didn't quite understand exactly what we were trying to say, and it was kind of frustrating to figure out, well, how do I reword this so they can have their own frame of reference. We had an enormous amount of help, mostly from our interpreter. He worked with folks like us beforehand, knew kind of what it is that we wanted to convey to these people, and how to put it in such a context that if we use specific terms that were a little bit more well known to English-speaking folks or just Americans, how to put it in kind of their nuance. And that did help a lot, because when you don't quite understand their little points when they speak, it can be a little bit of frustration.
Were there any?
Hold on a second. We got to figure out this because it's. I'm hearing just a
Are
little
you
bit
hearing
of
too much from outside?
Yeah. Just 1 second.
All right.
We're back.
We were talking about, well, let's just start. We were getting noise all the way along. Let's just, under what circumstances did things not quite go right, and how were you able to, you talked about the translators. Did we finish that thought before the noise came? Or the noise came at the end
I
of
think
that,
you're
right?
probably okay.
Okay.
I was really trying to stop it because just in case.
Okay, okay.
So I wasn't hearing it in my
I'll go on to the
headset
next
very
one then.
much. So.
Okay, you talked about getting familiarized, working through the interpreters. Were there any physical clues that you were able to observe and learn from that while you were there, that you were able to adapt your behavior as well?
From my personal experience, a lot of knowing whether or not the folks that we were speaking to understood what we were saying and the concepts that we were trying to convey. Most of them were from facial expressions. You could really see how they looked at us, that what we said or what we were trying to convey hit home in the way we wanted it to, or they didn't quite understand it, or it didn't come across the way we actually wanted it to. That was a huge indicator for us, and it made us, when we did see those kind of hints, elaborate a little bit more if we felt that they were uncomfortable, to try to make sure that they really understood our ideas and our thoughts, so there was no miscommunication.
Could you give a couple of specific examples of that occurrence? Like maybe one time you would say something and you'd think you were saying this, and then their face said, "What about that?"
For us at this point, there really wasn't much. When we spoke to the gentleman, he was a principal of a school, and a lot of the things that we were talking about were very basic objects, materials, things of that nature. He understood a lot of what we were talking about. It was very, very clear. It was really tough to kind of misinterpret when we were speaking about things like books, pencils, school materials. When he was talking about the school itself, it did seem like we had a very good, clear conversation. So unfortunately, there wasn't a whole lot that made us look at kind of restating an idea so that he could understand it.
So it sounds like from the experience, there wasn't that much of a conflict as much as we heard in the other stories. Is that sounding correct to you?
Like it. I was wondering about, you said something I didn't understand. You said that originally you were stationed in Kenya?
We were originally there in the Horn of Africa to go to the country of Kenya. Yes, ma'am, due to certain reasons, we were pulled out of the country. So we had only been there for 2 days.
And then, so from Kenya to where?
We went back to Djibouti,
Okay.
and that's where we were for the remainder of our time.
Can you explain the differences that, well, you only came for 2 days, but any cultural information you'd like to share about the differences you saw between Kenya and Djibouti?
To be honest, the time spent in Kenya was between a hotel and the U.S. Embassy. We got to speak to a few people, but it was in a very closed, confined. They were either people from Kenya, but not in the context of where we were going. They were very well-educated folks who, had lived in Kenya all their lives, but in this situation we were in, it was only in a round table type scenario, speaking about, hi, here we are, and explaining to them who we were. That was about it. We didn't really get to indulge too much in not only the local people, but the culture either.
So, your impressions and where you felt areas of discomfort, or your visitor felt areas of discomfort, and if you were to say to somebody being deployed there, what kind of general outlook should they have? What kind of should they look out for? What might they want to know beforehand? What would be your top 3 suggestions for somebody being deployed there?
The largest thing that I would suggest for anybody being deployed there, one is understand the culture. You have to understand the culture. There are so many little nuances in other countries that we as Americans either overlook or don't really understand, so it's not a large deal to us, but it is elsewhere. And learn, if you can, the language. Any little bit you can learn. There is a vast amount of confidence that you gain when you can sit across from another person and, however small, communicate in their language and understand their way of life. It goes for both sides of the table. You feel confident, and they really believe that you are a genuine person. You are trying to understand who they are and where they're coming from.
That's great. Great.
Mhm.
Jessica?
Sure.
I wonder, in Djibouti, could you explain and share an experience or two where you were really surprised by some cultural difference that maybe you weren't anticipating?
Again, our
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can you address the answer to Barbara?
Oh, sure. Again, with our very limited time, we got to go out and engage and talk with a lot of the locals. It was a school environment. The school was not yet in session, we got to speak with one or two of the teachers there, along with the principal. But there was, outside of that setting, again, there was really no immersion or cultural nuances that we had to understand that would benefit any negotiation or communication that we had done. If we had been there a lot longer and we really started and fostered a relationship with these people, that might have gotten to that point. We would have a closer communication level with them, but for such a short time, it was very tough to really get immersed.
Right.
Anything funny that happened, humorous to you or anybody else? You can say yes or no.
Outside of us getting kicked out of a country, I don't think so. I mean, that's our claim to fame so far for our team, is being not necessarily kicked, but pulled out of a country for obvious, no issues of our team. It was above and beyond, anything that we or any of our folks had done. So, but it was quite. We were very interested in getting down into the area and getting to learn a lot about the people, and just we were there mostly to observe, and that was the beauty of it, to become involved. So it was a little disappointing.
Anything you would do differently? Not related to that issue, but just in general, anything you would do differently to prepare or anything else?
More time to understand, like we had said, more time to understand the language, the small nuances of the culture. When you're out there, like I said, there's just such an increase in confidence when you need to talk to people, and the largest thing is that language barrier. When you could get past that, so much more is open to you.
Got a great bite on that already, so I think we're good.
Okay.
You got your bites in.
Thank you very much.
Spell your last name and your rank, please.
My rank is Senior Chief Petty Officer Burns. My last name is Byrnes.
And your first name?
Terrence, Ternce.
One R. Great. Now, first thing I'll ask is from where you've returned, where you were deployed, and how long ago it was that you came back.
My previous deployment was actually to Balad, Iraq, back in 2006. I worked for part of Special Operations while I was in Iraq. It was really, our tours were only 120 days, but I only did 3 months, not as extensively as some other units are, because we're rolling 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it's roughly from August of 2006 to mid-November 2006.
Okay, so you arrive in Iraq, and you are interacting with people, and this discussion is all about cultural differences that we're going to be having. And what, right off the bat, did you see as a potential problem area with you being able to understand the new culture? And if there were problems with that respect, what were they, and what was your workaround around them? How did you get around?
Well, honestly, where I worked in Balad was on LSA Anaconda, which was basically was a logistics base. And so you had a lot of American workers, and you also had a lot of people that were from India, and you also had some people who helped out, like in the detainee operations arena. I did have the opportunity to meet like-minded people of the same nationality that dealt with the detainees, not so much with the actual local population, only with inside the logistics base itself. But the people that I did talk to that were Iraqi or Arabic descent, they were very nice. They were very nice people. When I would interact with them, especially I would sit down with them in the dining facility, and I would eat with them and kind of talk with them to kind of get to know them. I asked them about their families and stuff, and then it's kind of like a trend or a pattern in someone that you don't know. You try to find a common ground with them, and identify something that might be important, that's important to you, which might be important to them. So I talked about family and stuff. I really couldn't talk about, they really couldn't talk about their job and stuff as far as detainee operations, but just what the cultural differences are, family, maybe identifying some kind of food or something to that nature. But that was really the extent of my interaction with Iraqis when I was deployed.
Was there anything about the behavior coming from an American perspective that might have taken the Iraqis a little bit aback that you could sense?
Well, not so much when I was in country, but just to kind of deviate a little differently, not deviate from your question, but when I flew from the United States, I actually flew, I wasn't on a military flight, I wasn't on a ship to come over to the Middle East.
Okay, let's start that again and just start when I flew over to Iraq, because the audience doesn't know that you're being questioned by anyone.
Okay.
Talking, so.
When I flew over from the United States, I flew to Great Britain, and when I was in Great Britain is when they had a big scare of airliners. They were afraid that airliners, there was a plot to blow up airliners flying from Great Britain to the United States. So I was going to be flying in from Great Britain to Qatar, and it was funny because when I found my way after I got off the plane. When I arrived in the UK, I found my way to the Qatar Airlines. So sitting in the Qatar Airlines, I befriended a family. There was a gentleman, his daughter, and then his two kids. And then I met up with a gentleman by the name of Sammy and his two kids. And the gentleman, Sammy, and I were talking, and kind of similar to what I was talking about with the Iraqis when I was in Iraq. Talking about family and stuff and just general commonality and sharing differences of culture. But what was really funny is it seemed that after talking to me, that he seemed to gain like my trust, which was, for me, traveling and not traveling, I'm not like a worldly traveler, but just traveling and being able to interact with this gentleman. He would actually, he and the other gentleman that had the other family, they actually took off because there was like massive amount of people around. So they took off, whether it was to go to the bathroom or to get something to eat with their, to go get something to eat for their kids. I was basically like, it was almost like I was the overseer of their kids, which kind of made me feel that they, I don't know if it was as a male, that they gave both gentlemen gave me an actual trust, so it was an assumption, not that I asked, but it was just an assumption that they had gained my trust, and that was really all the way from the time that we were sitting in line for like 3 or 4 hours to the time we got on the airlines, and even to the time that we flew into Qatar as well also, so that was pretty significant.
When you arrived in Iraq, talk about how you had that as a sense to establish commonality and the idea of common experiences and trust and family, and how that worked with your relationship with the Iraqis.
Well, one of the things that I did find out is that the males actually have a significant role. From what I was saying, the males have a significant role in the family, and one of the things that I've even seen too, especially in the Arabic culture, not so much in the Iraqi culture, but when I've deployed about 10 years ago, like when I was in Kuwait, I always saw the men with the men. I always saw the women with the women, and depending on in the Islamic culture, whether they're fully dressed up or whether they just have the headscarf. And I would always see the men always walking in front, and with the women behind, kind of like tailing them behind. So that kind of made see significantly that the men had what kind of role that they had. It was kind of like man dominant. And I mean that was one of the things that I learned.
So give somebody who best advice as to it sounds like you went in with a very open mind, open attitude, and talk to somebody. If you were to advise somebody who had not been there yet, what's the best survival skill you could give them to create a common bond with the local population?
Do some research. Do some research.
You start that was saying to get to have a good relationship with the local population when you get there. Do some research beforehand.
Right. I mean, it's like in any trip, whether it's a trip in the United States and you're going to go across country, or whether it's a trip and you're going to fly to Europe, to the Middle East, Southeast Asia, no matter wherever you're going to do, I would recommend that individual or a group of people actually do some research about the culture, about the food, about the religious aspect. How do people interact with one another with respect? It can be with men and men, it could be with women and women, or it can be, do they interact together as a group? And that would be my best recommendation. And if there are any local cultural organizations where they live, to maybe be able to find out if they can actually speak with the people of that culture or the country that they're going to go to get a little sense of what it's going to be like. Because sometimes, especially here, especially in the United States, we have people that are of different ethnicities and stuff that you may know, or that your friend may know, or whatever the case may be, and they might not even talk about it, you know. And so that's where it comes right back to we were talking about having an open mind, because you have to have an open mind, especially when you're in another person's country, unlike the United States, which is totally different. So.
Great. I think you nailed it.
Can I ask a quick question? Can you talk about personal space in Iraq for a little bit more? Because you mentioned personal space when you first came in, kind of jokingly, but describe what that was like there. I remember no one heard what I said on tape.
From what I've seen, and this really goes back to talking to the gentleman, and there was actually one woman as well too, that were doing the detainee operations. I was pretty close with them. I necessarily didn't have the outside. I wasn't on the outside with the local population, talking with them. So the people that I was talking to they're probably a little bit more westernized and stuff, but still kind of, they still kept their culture with them, but still having been westernized to some degree. I could get a sense of, I could talk to a male, but really when I was with the two gentlemen, I really couldn't direct any questions at the lady and really talk to her. The gentleman might speak for her, and that was really about it. So that's what I learned when I was there.
Anything else?
Any humorous stories or anything about yourself or anyone else?
No, I really don't have any humorous stories. Not really.
Quiet, please. Okay, go ahead.
I'm Christopher Wyeth, and the last name's Wyeth, and I'm an equipment operator, first class.
Okay. And Chris, they won't hear my questions, so that when you answer, if you could sort of repeat the question in the beginning of your answer so it has a context.
Okay.
And I'd like to ask you first where you were deployed and when you returned.
I was deployed to West and Central Africa. Just recently, I went to Cameroon, Gabon, and Senegal.
And how long has it been since you've been home?
Just a week, actually. I was only gone for 2 weeks, so it wasn't a very long deployment.
Okay. Now, so you were there for 2 weeks.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did that give you enough exposure to feel like you were able to experience with the local population or your co-workers any experiences in which you had a little bit of a struggle with trying to get an idea across, trying to understand how best to create this relationship, and if that did happen, how did you go about making that better?
The hardest part as far as dealing with the host nation was not so much building the relationships, because we were in uniform and they loved that. The hardest part was I don't speak French, and their English wasn't as well as some other countries that you may have been to, so that was very hard for us to communicate. Hand signals worked really well, and just trying to work through it on both parts.
So it wasn't so matter that the relationship was there, but it's more of a language issue that you're strictly dealing with.
Yes.
Okay, so given that it's strictly a, this might be more into your area, it's more of a,
Countries, I'm sorry.
It was Cameroon, Senegal, and Gabon. They're all primarily French-speaking countries. Cameroon was they spoke enough English to where we could communicate really well, but Port-Gentil, Gabon, I could not, it was really hard, and we actually used a translator off the ship that we were attached to. He was from Togo, so it really helped out a lot there. And then Senegal, it was a little bit better, but we also had the U.S. Embassy personnel there who were going through French classes and helping us out there as well.
so what sort of specific work were you there to do, and how would have being able to speak the language helped you to accomplish that faster, easier, better, whatever?
The type of work that we were doing there was it was a pre-deployment site survey, just like the skit that we had yesterday. It was for Senegal in the skit. That's what I was actually doing in Senegal and Cameroon and Gabon. We were assessing clinics and schools for potential projects in January when we go on deployment with the Nashville. I lost part of the question there, I'm sure.
Okay, well, let's start it again, and don't refer to yesterday's seminar, but just
Okay.
The question was, what work were you sent there to do, and how would your work have been easier, of better quality, faster, improved by knowing the language?
By knowing the language, it definitely would have helped out. As far as what we were trying to do is in assessing their needs, they could communicate exactly. I'm trying to put together what they really need, and hopefully I've captured all that the best I could without speaking the language. But definitely with the language, it would have helped out a lot.
Did you sense any frustration on their part, and how did that work itself out?
I didn't. They didn't show it if they were frustrated. I know I was getting frustrated with it, and I tried not to show it as best I could. And we worked through it, and definitely that's. I mean, in good-natured people, they try to work through those things to get a happy ending in it for all parties.
Right. Well, your story is interesting, but there's not enough drama and conflict.
Yeah, there isn't. There isn't. And even past deployments, they were English speaking. Liberia and Ghana, that it wasn't an issue there either. So.
Yeah. Well, good for you.
Definitely. I'm hoping to go back to Liberia this time. So.
Yeah. Now, are you going to do language training? Do you have an opportunity to do language training before you deploy again?
I hope so. We missed the class. I was actually, during the 15 days that I was deployed for the PDSS, we had a French immersion class, and I missed that one. So hopefully I can get one before January. But it would definitely help.
And you can parlez-vous all over the place.
Definitely.
Yes. Okay.
For you guys,
Yes.
what did you learn to do, say, non-verbally, to convey, one, what you needed to have happen, and two, how could you build rapport without knowing how to say it, but expressing it in some other way? Remember, address it to Barbara.
Yes. As far as another type of signal is universal hand signals type, maybe even facial expressions worked out really well. Just even drawing it on a piece of paper what you mean goes a long way. And I mean, that would be the best explanation, I guess, is hand signals were huge, and just trying to maybe point to what you really were understanding and, or trying to get at, or trying to convey what you were trying to talk to them about. It's kind of hard to explain, I guess. It just kind of worked its way out throughout the whole process, but it was very challenging.
Can you explain what hand signals specifically worked really well, and what hand signals maybe didn't work out so well?
The handshake that we had discussed, the snap shake is what they call it, that works out well. If you know that going into a meeting with somebody, and at least you have that common bond between the cultures, that goes a long way. What was the other one I was trying to think of what they called it, but it's kind of like a hitchhiking thumb. It's a not to do thing.
It's that.
Yeah.
It's not your number one, it's...
Yeah, and it's kind of an insult. So I knew it's kind of like, it's like this, but it's down lower, and if you move your thumb up and down, it's an insult in some cultures over there. It's
Can we
like,
do that as, we'll start that again,
Okay.
and just say, here's an example of a hand signal and one that does not work well.
Mhm.
Everybody knows about the thumbs up, but
Mhm.
there's another way that they misinterpret it, and then physically show it, and then look at me when you're doing that.
okay,
Say, don't do this.
okay. A typical hand signal that you should not use is the thumbs up and movement of the thumb as well. It's an insult, and I think it's like saying your mother or something to them, and that's not good.
Is that what you needed?
Yeah, that's really great. Stuff
Okay.
like that, it's funny because we forget, like when we come back and we thought, I remember that one time I did this one gesture,
Mhm.
everybody was like, ah!
Yeah.
I was on a bus in Italy and I was upset because there were too many people. I said, Jesus Christ, because I was frustrated. Everyone was like, because I was in Rome near the Vatican. And I'm just saying, like, certain things that we forget when we come back from a place,
Definitely.
that's so crucial, because someone else, you don't want them to make that same mistake. So thank you for explaining that.
No problem.
All
I think that's it.
Okay. Meeting people, trying to get jobs done with different cultures, and I'm going to suspect that there, because I'm hearing it a lot from other people too, that there are a lot of common situations. Somebody, I won't say because you have to say, but so that's kind of the angle that I'll take on this. And secondly, well, just to get your name on tape, if you could say your first name, spell your last name, and give us your rank. And once we get rolling.
We're ready.
My name is Charlotte Rayo, Reijo. You wanted where I'm from?
The rank?
You're ready.
Oh, I am a Chief Petty Officer, E7, United States Navy.
When you answer the questions, speak right to part.
You'll speak to me, and
Okay.
they won't hear my question, and they won't know that I'm questioning you, so that when you speak, if you could repeat a little bit of the question so that the viewer knows what we're talking about.
Okay.
Great. So basically, we want to talk, and I think it's really interesting too, because we have your unique perspective as a woman. And so you've been, if you could first say the places to which you've been deployed, and if those situations that you occurred in each of those places in communicating with the local population, or whoever you had to work with in the local population, were they different in each place, or were they similar?
My first deployment I did to Iraq. I was with Bravo Surgical Company from Med Battalion out of Camp Lejeune. So we were there, and we didn't actually have a lot of interaction with the local populace. We did have some of the Iraqi people come through as casualties, but my interaction with them was actually kind of limited. I was there as ancillary support. I was a pharmacy technician. So we did see some of the local population come through as casualties, but other than that, we didn't work really directly with them. My next deployment, I went to Haiti. I was also with Medical Battalion, 2nd Medical Battalion out of Camp Lejeune. I was with Charlie Surgical Company. I had some limited French that I had learned in high school, so I tried to use some of my language skills there. I spoke very, very limited French though, so generally I would try to tell them I don't speak French, but because I would say it in French, they would think that I did and keep going. My next deployment was to Okinawa, Japan with NMCB 133. I worked with the Seabees. I worked with the clinic there on Camp Shields, so I really didn't have any interaction with the local population. As far as civil affairs goes, I've never actually worked in that capacity before, like the latest deployment that we did to Africa. We had very limited time there, so we really didn't have a lot of interaction. My team leader did a lot of the talking with the people when we went to the school and what have you.
When you're deployed to a different country and you're deployed along with men and women, is there a different experience that you sense being a woman?
Yes, but I think some of that also goes along with the training that we get beforehand, especially when you go to Muslim cultures where you realize
Okay,
that they
so
don't.
it's like, if you could start that again, we receive, as a woman, we receive training when we're going into Muslim cultures, and then talk about what you're taught to expect.
Okay. As a woman, we receive training before we would go into Muslim cultures, so we expected, or we came to expect that how they viewed us as women, that they may not necessarily want to, I don't know how to say what I'm trying to say. I'm sorry.
That's right.
Like I said, I'm really nervous.
No, don't worry about it.
I don't know how to.
I can't even tell you're nervous back here.
Oh, really?
You don't come off as
You can't hear my heart beating from all the way back there.
That's what that sounds like. Just relax, we're just friends.
But just, if you could just talk about, as a woman, you get training here, teaching you what to possibly expect there and the value of that to you.
I think as a woman, when they give us the training of going into Muslim cultures, we're already kind of predisposed to expecting them not to want to communicate with us and understanding that in their culture they won't feel comfortable just coming up to a woman because that's not acceptable in their culture. So they also try to teach that to the men so that they understand if you see a Muslim woman, you don't just go talk to her.
We're safe.
Was that a good slam?
Yeah, we're good.
Good. We were plagued by
They
nervous
came right at the
laughs.
very end, so.
Okay. Well, again, we're in a situation where you're good luck. You didn't have to. You weren't put in the situations where you had to really make sure you didn't do something so wrong to not let the job work. You were able to do your work pretty efficiently. So, is there anything else that we can think of?
You know, she's answering questions so beautifully. I don't know, it's nice to just hear you talk. Whatever you want to share.
Well, if you were to, if you're given this opportunity, and there will be other men and women who are going to be deployed, and they will be dealing with cultural differences, and it was said to us that the Navy is being deployed all over the world, and if you could share, what sort of attitude would you suggest that a woman have who's going to be put in a situation like that?
Well, as a woman going on deployment, you definitely have to realize that there's obstacles that you're going to have to overcome, and even sometimes the men in your own unit may not necessarily respect your position as a woman and come to expect that from the local population and things like that. But you also have to keep an open mind, and wherever you go, people are people. So, I mean, if you can build those relationships, it's not necessarily going to matter if you're a man or a woman.
That's a great line. Good. Thank you.
Deeper.
Nice to look professional, though.
The camera really wants pretty specific,
There we go, we're good. Yeah,
That
we're all
good?
Thank you,
exaggerates
sir.
all the.
It looked like you're just kind of, okay, so. Anytime you're ready.
Anytime I'm ready.
Your name, spell your
Oh.
last name, and your rank.
Lewis, Lewis, Senior Chief,
And your first name?
Matt, Matt.
Okay. Okay. Now, you sound like you are hankering to talk about your most recent deployment. And I'd like to first ask you from where you returned and how long ago was that?
I returned from the Philippines last month.
Respond to your questions, talk right to Bart.
Oh, yes, you can talk.
Please don't look at the camera.
Oh,
Okay.
that's right, yeah, you're talking to me, and just as a reminder, the audience doesn't know that I'm asking the question,
Okay.
so you answered that exactly perfectly in a full sentence, and kind of saying, I was here then, you know what I'm saying, okay. So, we're talking about cultural differences and overcoming those cultural differences in order to help you to achieve your mission and get your work done. And so you arrive in the Philippines, and what challenges did you have to overcome? Where did you initially see, this isn't going so well, I think I can do it better? And how do you adjust those sails to get, accomplish what you need to accomplish?
I have no idea. I think, and I think that's the question everybody says. No one is an expert at cultural affairs. The only people that are experts are the people that live in those countries. So the tough sell for everyone to do is to go to a place and try to adapt yourself to the people that are there. And boots on ground is the only way to do it. The only way to do it is to be there, be around those people. But what tools can I get before I get there? Oh, it'd be really nice to be able to speak maybe 100 words in that vocabulary, be able to walk up to someone and introduce myself correctly, and not just in a textbook way, but in the way that narrative that they're used to hearing. It would be that's what we need in a nutshell.
Well, so you're there, your boots are on the ground, and what are you hearing and observing of things around you that's helping you to pick up what you maybe would have liked to have known beforehand, but now you're learning?
And I think this is geared towards more to Iraq, not my recent deployment. So.
Okay. So would.
Just for the record, I was in Iraq from 06 to 07.
Uh-huh.
Then from 07 to 08, I was in the Philippines. So.
Okay.
I'll go back. Whatever you guys need.
To talk about the Iraq then, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's forget the Philippines.
No worries.
And let's start over and just say I was deployed to Iraq for X number of months.
Right.
Okay.
Hi. I'm Johnny Cash. I was deployed in Iraq from 06 to 07.
And so I want to go back to the same set of questioning is you arrive in Iraq, you have a set of challenges, you need to establish relationships, you talk about it would be nice to know the language. Well, you don't. And you're there, and you have to make your own rules, figure out your own protocols. What cues do you take around you? What do you see? What do you hear around you that helps you to change your behavior so that you can really interact in that world?
Once again, I have no idea how to change my behavior to match the ones around me. I think in Iraq, your first learning curve comes from your interpreters that you work with. So you learn a lot from your interpreters. For one, they do speak English and they speak the native language because they're usually from those areas. But they're a little bit. You can trust them a little bit more than you can say trust the locals out in town for stuff. So you start with your interpreter and kind of. He'll give you some do's and don'ts, and that's where you really want to start with, I think. Doesn't mean they're going to tell you everything. It doesn't mean you can actually really trust them, but for the most part, we have a great working relationship with a lot of Iraqis that are helping us over there doing such things as interpreting and stuff.
So how do those relationships develop? I don't imagine that they're right off the bat, they trust you, you trust them. There has to be some progress there. Where do you start, and how does it work toward?
It's trust with anyone is a continuous thing. And in civil affairs, our biggest thing that we try to do is build relationships, and having cultural knowledge of the people you're working with. I mean, it goes without saying. I couldn't come in America someplace and build a relationship with someone if I didn't have some working knowledge of what they're about, whether it's a New Yorker, whether it's someone from Louisiana. I better know a little. In Iraq, it's big because you have different tribes, and then you have the big tribes. But even the bigger tribes, you have smaller tribes. So you learn from your interpreter a little bit, but you also learn from the elders. You can learn a little bit from the kids about what to do and what not to do, because they'll tell you they'll tell you things that maybe their parents are ashamed to tell you, but there's just common knowledge to them. Don't do that. So that's one way of finding out you're doing something maybe you shouldn't be doing. The kids will say, make fun of you in some ways.
Can you give an example of that?
Not really, no.
Okay.
I was thinking when I was saying I can't really give an example.
Mm-hmm. So you knew the answer to my next question right away.
What's that?
I can't give you an example.
Yeah.
Okay. So were there situations in which you were dealing with the local population and you knew by their reaction in one way or another that something wasn't going right? And how did that make you feel? How did you perceive how they felt? And what goes next?
Well, as a civil affairs guy in Iraq, you have to, a lot of times you're in a negotiating role. So now you're at a loss because you're negotiating through a third party, sometimes a fourth and fifth party, through your interpreter, through another trusted agent of somewhat, say on the Nahia Council, to the actual sheik or the actual property owners, to the actual person you're trying to get something from. So if you will, negotiations is already a very difficult thing. So if you do it through 3, 4, 5 people, you can just imagine how convoluted and non-negotiating you're really doing. So I think a lot of times the problems I had was trying to get my point across, which was, hey, I don't have any money, or hey, I don't have anything to help you with this. This is all I have, but only getting. And you may sit there for hours and weeks sometimes going back to the same meeting, talking to the same person, trying to get your one point across that if you just spoke Arabic, you could have said 5 minutes and you'd have understood and you'd have been on your merry way, and the next meeting you could have carried on something different. But instead it took you 3 weeks to say, hey, I'm not doing this road project here, okay? Is that it?
Was there any time that you went through an experience like that and you thought at the time, boy, this would really be funny if it wasn't pissing me off so much right now, but something that it's just absurd, and maybe you have an example of that?
I wish you had these questions like an hour ago. I could have had answers for you. You could have prepped us. No, I think, what was the question again?
Was there, looking back on it, you think, oh my God, that was funny. At the time it really wasn't, but looking back on it, you go, yeah, that was pretty amusing.
Maybe you could even do like a translation sort of thing, Barbara, is that what you're thinking? Maybe a lost in translation?
Like a lost in translation kind of, because I think when you were talking, you're talking to this guy, that guy, that guy, it's like playing telephone, and what starts here and comes out the other end, lost in translation, if there's maybe an example of that.
I mean, it happened a lot, but I'm trying to think of something I could allude to say it. And
Well, it's not a big,
I don't.
You're too young for short-term memory loss.
No, it's just a lot of the stories would be,
Complicated, I would imagine.
yeah, I mean, I would just tell you this and it wouldn't really mean anything without the whole story. So.
Exactly. Yeah, and we need sound bites. So, if you're in a position now where somebody's going to be, they're getting ready to be deployed, and they're using this video game, and they're trying to learn the language, and their brain is full, and your role here is to come on as a friendly face. I've been there. I did it. I got through it. Here's what I can say to you to help you out as you're going through these same struggles. What might that statement be?
Well, I mean, it's very serious, and not so a little bit for the Navy, but also for the soldiers and Marines, and the sailors and airmen. If you can just spend a day, one hour a day out of your week prior to deployment, trying to understand the language and culture, it's only going to make you that much better at your job. I mean, if you have no interaction with any of the people you're going to work with, it's one thing, but how do you know that's going to happen? So, you don't need a lot to learn a little. You just have to do it. So, yeah, I don't know.
That was great. like that. It's really concrete too. It's like, take an hour a week, you know, immerse yourself. You don't have to learn the whole language, just get a comfort factor.
Matt, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Can you think of any gestures that would help you or had helped you when you were in Iraq?
Yeah, I mean, we
Oops, except what, even though the question's coming,
Got
you
it.
still have to check the answer this way.
got it.
Because the camera,
You know, it's great.
otherwise you'll shift the answer.
The hand gestures I always used over the heart.
Start again.
Yeah. You know, when dealing with Iraqis, you always do the hand over the heart when you're talking. It's always a sign of respect to whoever. I think that's common knowledge now, but it's something that's very important as you're talking. And I would always say inshallah a lot when I finished what I was saying. If we were talking about something that we wanted to have done, or if we were talking about the future of a certain village, and you would always add in inshallah as you finish that conversation, and they would do it. And it just comes with a mirroring what you see the Iraqis doing to some degree. You know, obviously you're not going to carry around prayer beads and start holding your prayer beads in one hand and perhaps holding your partner's hand in one hand, but it is another thing where you may have to hold a grown man's hand while you're talking to him, and it's not a bad thing. It's those who have worked with Americans a lot know that Americans don't like to hold hands, but sometimes you work with guys that want to test your mettle, if you will, and see if you will hold hands with them while they're talking, and like it's no big deal to them, so no big deal to you, but that can get uncomfortable.
That remind me, there are two things that came up this morning, and phrases that are used that are, you know, not nice, but they, in their culture, they'll be fine. And help me out with this. Haji, and Abdul. Have you ever had any experiences with those phrases being used and having negative impact?
Well, yeah, if you want to beat the living shit out of somebody, you might want to call him a Hajj while you're beating the shit out of him. You can erase that. I'm just kidding. Now, it's a very negative term. It's a very negative term. Yeah, Hajj is a very negative term used by Americans in Iraq. You want me to say any more of that?
Well, I don't know.
You know, Hajj is a extremely negative term used by Americans in Iraq because it refers to someone that has been on the Hajj, and whether they have or they haven't, an American calling them that, they know it's a derogatory term. So don't use Hajj. You like that? It's good.
Yeah, good. Are we
We're
good?
running out of tape, by the way, right?
Well, yeah.
I got about 8 minutes left.
Okay, I think we've got to
All right, cut.
cut. Okay, so I'm going to ask you first to just get on tape once we start rolling. Are we rolling? Okay, we're good. And just your first and last name, if you could spell your last name and your rank.
Okay, I am Jody Binette, Binettete, and I'm a chief in the Navy
Jody with a Y or an I?
with a Y.
Oops, sorry. Okay. So let's talk about your experience that a lot of people have seen on the television because it was broadcast around the world, and but you were there on the ground, and you come as a unique perspective as a woman in a pivotal time in service. And so if you could tell us about what you observed when you first got to Iraq, and then the drive into Baghdad, and the people you didn't see and the people you did see, and how that interaction went.
Okay. Like I said, we were waiting on the light.
You can't say like I said.
Oh, okay.
And look
Let's
at
start
Barb
off.
when he
And look
answers
at me.
Oh, okay. Okay. So,
And when you start, you have to give some indication of what the question is. Like when I was in Iraq.
When
Okay.
we first landed in Iraq.
okay. When we first started convoying in Iraq, we were waiting at the line of departure when the war started. So after that first evening, we started convoying through Iraq. And for the longest time, we didn't see people. You know, you start to think there's no people here. You know, where did everybody go? Not animals, nothing, for a very long time. And we just convoyed and convoyed. And then all of a sudden, when you start getting into areas where there are people, you're surrounded. I mean, you know, it's like you go from nothing to all these people that are very different, and I think the hardest time, or the time where you get a little tense, is when, like, we were building a bridge going into Baghdad that had been blown, and we were repairing it, basically putting a new bridge over it, and we would stop and let people come through, going into Baghdad and coming out, and most of it, honestly, was people looting. And some people trying to get home, some people trying to get back home from going into Baghdad. And some of the women, you know, and even some of the men say, oh, you're so strong, oh, you're a woman, you have weapons, and they smile and they wave and they're very excited to see you there. Some of the women, mostly older and more traditional, the ones that had the tattoos on their hands, some of them had tattoos on their faces. And were more covered, they did not like me at all. And to be honest, at that time I was in that bridge platoon, I was the only female. So, of course, I got the majority of the dirty looks because I was the only girl there. So there is quite a difference, and I think a lot of it is the younger and older, the more traditional and the younger women, as far as their feelings towards us.
So if you had the ability to interact with some of these older women, how do you imagine that would have gone, and how might have you dealt with that if you had more than just a dirty look, and if you had to work with them or have a conversation?
Honestly, at that time, I don't know how it would have gone. At that time, everything was kinetic. There was not a lot of working with the population because, you know, the threat level was very high. We were still at war at that time, you know, if you call it that. So, as far as how it would have gone.
Well, then let me ask you, before you got there, were you prepared for how you would be treated? And if you could begin before I got there.
Before I got there, I guess there were, you know, there's always that, you get a lot of, oh, you know, you're a woman, they expect this and they expect that, and what they think of American women as far as, you know, we're not as religious, and I guess I don't even know how to say this without being, that we're loose, you know, that, and there are some things, you know, there were times that people wanted to touch me, and to me that made me very uncomfortable, and I think a lot of it just had to do with I look different. I'm a female soldier, they'd never seen that before. To me, I was very threatened by that. I didn't want people to get as close to me as maybe they got to some of the guys. But as far as how the women treated me, I guess it was you're a little bit taken back because you feel like, man, I'm coming here and I can help you, you know, I can help you get treated better. You know, not me personally, but we're coming here and maybe we can help women get rights that they don't have right now. So you would think that maybe they would be a little more welcoming. But I suppose if somebody came here to our country and told us to change, you know, hey, the way you've been doing it is all bad, you gotta go this route, we probably wouldn't be very welcoming to it either, especially as you get older.
Is there anything about body language or gestures or anything like that you wanted to cover?
Yeah, why don't you ask her? I mean, as a person or as a woman, do you remember any gestures when you say, like, the older women didn't really like you? How did you know that they didn't like you? Did they say things, or did they gesture, or did they look at you a certain way?
It was,
And you'll be answering to me.
yeah, it was mostly dirty looks.
When the older women looked at me.
Yes, when the older women looked at me, it was, you know, you'd get some dirty looks, maybe some pointing, not the way we would point, more just a, you know, and a dirty look in your direction, or, you know, maybe some mumbling to whoever they were with about you. And it's very obvious, you know, when they're talking to you, because you're pretty spread out, you're doing security. So, other than that, I can't really think of any gestures that, it was 2003, so it was quite a while ago.